Hello, thank you for joining us for California Lawyers for the Arts annual Music Business Seminar. My name is Ned Hearn. I am an attorney in private practice, former board president, and current board member of the California Lawyers for the Arts.
My name is Gloria Ruiz Oster. I'm the Deputy Director and Southern California Director for California Lawyers for the Arts.
And I'm Eric Chun. I'm a musician and a professor in the commercial music department at Merrick River College in Sacramento, California. I'm also a board member of the California Lawyers for the Arts. My colleagues and I are happy to welcome you to the 2021 Music Business Seminar. This year, since we're not able to gather together in person, we've put together 4 weekly webinars that bring together music industry insiders, scholars, legal experts, and marketing professionals to offer all the latest in music business insights to help you navigate an artistic career in 2021.
As a bit of background, California Lawyers for the Arts is a statewide nonprofit organization with offices in San Francisco, Berkeley, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and San Diego. CLA has been providing legal and technical assistance to the creative community since 1974. One of our core services is our State Bar Certified Lawyer Referral Service, which provides referrals to highly qualified attorneys who can work with you to resolve your legal issues in a professional manner. Depending on a client's income, legal assistance may be available on a pro bono or on a reduced fee basis. We also offer a specialized program in conjunction with the U.S. Patent Office that assists entrepreneurs and inventors and small businesses with patent applications. We also have a range of alternative dispute resolution services available, from negotiations counseling to mediation and arbitration, all of which can help parties involved in a dispute to avoid the expense of going to court and instead to find workable solutions through a confidential process guided by trained third-party neutrals. Lastly, we offer a year-long schedule of educational programs that include workshops and conferences and seminars like this one on various legal and business topics. Many of our previous programs have been recorded and are posted on our YouTube channel. And we hope you'll use these tools to stay on top of the legal issues that can affect your creative careers. We hope you'll follow us on social media to stay in touch and to learn about upcoming events.
Thank you to our sponsors and to the generous support we receive from our funders, members, and all of you here tonight for making this seminar and so many of our public programs possible.
Okay, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before I actually introduce myself, let me turn it over to my esteemed colleagues. This is going to be a very exciting panel and I'm excited that you can join us. So let's start first with Eric Chun. Eric, please introduce yourself very briefly.
How you doing, everybody, and welcome to the marketing seminar. Boy, is it going to be a rocking one today. Lots of questions on what the marketing tactics and techniques and methods are going to be for today's music creators and beyond that. I'm happy to have you here tonight on behalf of the professionals and the industry leaders that we have here. We're really fortunate to have a great team tonight. And I am the owner of Creative Music Services, also as the founder of the American River College Commercial Music Program, retiring in May after 32 years, but running my business for a long, long time in LA and up here. And I'm really excited to have you here. And I feature production, video, music creation, education, consultation, whatever we can get our hands on to keep busy in this time of the season here. Welcome again, and thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you, Eric. Marcus Barone, please introduce yourself briefly, your background.
All right, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Marcus Barone, and I'm a motion picture executive and motion picture music supervisor. I ran Motion Picture Corps, part of Columbia TriStar. That music department for about 8 years. I was also head of Orion Pictures for about 4 or 5 years. And I am still a motion picture feature supervisor and music executive for film, streaming, and features. Thank you for inviting me. And I believe I will be contributing to each and every one of the creative people what they are and what they can bring to the media table, what we need. So I will play the role of a music supervisor, what I do, and I'm going to put you through a scenario of what I need and what you are and what you create. And I will divide those into two categories where you'll understand, have a better and a fuller understanding of what I do and how to get your music in motion pictures.
So Jason, please introduce your background and yourself.
Hi, my name's Jason Sewell. I graduated in 1996 from Eric Chun's classes at American River College. That was focused on audio engineering and music business. And shortly after that, I started working for a record distributor, and I was a marketing rep there for about 5 years. That was during the time, we were marketing CDs. And so I kind of went through the process of the transition, through Napster and eventually iTunes taking over. And that company went out of business because of that, because, they were distributing CDs. So then I transitioned to running a recording studio. I did that for about 10 years and eventually joined an international touring band. And we put out several releases on our own record label. And we've been earning a living doing that since. So that's kind of where my insight will be.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason. Welcome, everyone. And briefly, I am a fashion entertainment lawyer. I go by Miss Uduak with the law firm of Fashion ENT Law. And I've actually been with CLA for quite a long time, since law school. That's been almost 20 years now, a little over 20 years. Always enjoy the program, great organization. So we are ready to begin. And where I want to start, I thought, Jason, you did a great job of referencing Napster. We've gone all the way from early web, Napster, all the way to Napster era. Now we're dealing with artificial intelligence and major content overload. And that content overload is having so many, from music users to the artists and other creators, including lawyers, trying to figure out, are we supposed to just be on social media and be all social? So what I want to do is just step back and go back to the traditional basics of just marketing that we all learned, right, in college. So we're going to look at the marketing mix for everybody, and we're going to look at how do you go through that marketing value chain by starting first with the product. So looking at the product specifically, let me start with Eric with respect to that. In this day and age with content overload, as I've already stated, or do you still think content is king in this day and age?
Music's not going to go away. It's an art that's preserved from amongst civilizations, societies. We need music. We need content at the same time. And we have a vast need that music, I believe, is now combining to create combinations, liaisons, and music becomes an art that can be packaged with new technology, new means of reaching new generations, new listeners, whether it's traditional forms of music from Beethoven all the way up to 2021. I believe the content amount is still within the scope of the listener and giving them the choice, even though there's massive amount of content being created this way. This is not 1970 or 60 where rock and roll music was new. It's a new era, but we also have new tools to access that music and continue to value what the music brings to our lives. And maybe that's the most important issue, is to look at society's value of music and how it keeps us together as a society and civilization.
Okay, so it appears you're saying content remains king regardless.
Yes.
Eric. So let's go to Jason, because that's a good transition. You're right in the mix of it. You're touring internationally. Of course, COVID has changed things a little bit, but you're creating the content on a daily basis. And you are finding ways to not only deal with music, but also music related products, whether you're talking video, merch, other kinds of products you're creating. So talk to us about the shift you've seen in how you're creating content and figuring out how to continue to capture attention span.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that you definitely hit on something good with the content overload. But I think that in the old days when I worked, at the record distributor, we were basically dealing with large bands that had a big budget. And the goal was to, get a gold record at least. And if you didn't sell 500,000 copies, you were basically a failure and you were dropped by a record label. And so at some point the transition happened, and I feel like if you're a smaller band who's not going to be selling 500,000 albums, that you have more opportunity now than ever before. And that's because you can record a song in your own home studio. There's plugins that are just amazing. The free software that you can get, it used to cost $100,000. So we have new opportunities to make our own music. And as long as I feel like if we're true to our art and make content that we believe in, that we love, we're going to find 100, 200 people that also love that music. And sometimes that's all you really need is 100 hardcore fans who really love your music. And you can do things like Patreon nowadays where it's exclusive content for just those people. And you can put your album out on DistroKid and everyone in the world has access to it. But I agree that the quality of your output is the most important thing. And again, for us, what we've done is, we've just done extensive touring and kind of one-on-one contact with people. Being in the same room with someone is so important, I feel like, as far as creating that bond and having your hardcore fan base. And then, you'll grow from there. You might have 10,000 Spotify listeners, but you're probably not selling 10,000 albums. Those are casual listeners. So I just feel like it's really important to focus on the quality as well with all of this content overload and make your product stand out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll come back into actually, we'll transition very soon to talk about distribution, but let me just wrap it up with Marcus on the product and that marketing value chain before I give the legal perspective, especially from my colleagues, lawyers listening to this and managers as well that are on the webinar with us. So Marcus, the frequency of content and just the quality of content as well. Can you add sort of your 2 cents to the discussion so far? So good.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up where Jason left off in concerts, which is a incredible way to make money after the pandemic. If we have an artist, let's say an up and coming artist, and they're allowed to, or find a promoter that can permit them to tour, the promoter will probably start them out in a 3,000 seat venue. They're not going to take a new artist and put them in a 10,000 seat venue. Let's skip over opening for a major artist, okay? A Beyonce or a Bruce Springsteen, when they do concerts, they fund the concert. They pay for the hall, they pay for the insurance, they pay for everything, and then they pay out their bands. With smaller artists and another artist, you have a promoter who basically upfronts the money, upfronts it, and then the artist is basically given a guarantee. And let's say you have a 3,000 seat a concert. Let's say they give you 3,000 seats. If you share the door, and if the promoter wants to take a chance, what he might do is you have 3,000 seats. He will give you maybe a guarantee of $50,000. You have to fill those seats, and each concert you get $50,000, and then maybe you have 3,000 seats, 2,000 he gets his money back, 1,000 you can split the cost, you can split the income. So there's many ways for a artist to do concerts. One way is without the guarantee, where you just get money from the door, or you get the guarantee per concert, and then the promoter will pay for everything, including security, insurance, food, production, trucks, but you are in charge of paying for your band and for your costumes and for your rehearsals and things like that.
Let me just focus in on that content discussion. And one of the reasons I'm trying to do that is the dialogue out there. I give a very short, brief intro of what I do, but I'm also an educator like Eric. I teach at the Academy of Arts, and I teach data analytics, where we really look at a lot of content and big data. And one of the consistent things is that it is just overwhelming noise out there. Everybody's confused. So I want to really zoom in on not only the quality of content, but the amount of content and whether certain traditional principles still apply in a digital age. So the way I will sort of wrap that discussion now on the legal end, as we get ready to move to distribution, is whether you are creating massive content online or limited content, whether you're a musician or along the lines of just a creator, the legal principles still stay the same, which is on the copyright law side, regardless of the volume of content, make sure that you are either the original author for purposes of copyright law, or if you're not the original author of the work, you're getting the requisite clearances. And we're going to see how all of that interplays when we get to Marcus at the tail end, where we start talking about licensing and sync licensing and the importance of those clearances. And if you're not getting those clearances, obviously there's an issue. And for colleagues, lawyers particularly, let me just add one final point. One of the things we're seeing in this digital age is such gap between more established, long-time lawyers in the space as opposed to sort of the upcoming lawyers. But regardless of it, especially for the older attorneys, don't be overwhelmed with the advisory part to your clients, regardless of the amount of social media platforms or social network platforms that are out there. The legal principles stay the same on the advisory, get clearances, and get your copyright together. So on that note, let's go to distribution and let's talk about how we're consuming music, right? So I think it was Jason that talked about Napster, but we all remember from, well, not all of us, but a lot of us remember vinyls, cassette tapes, MP3s, and now we're music streaming, or streaming music. So let me pose my question, actually starting with Jason. How should an artist distribute music today, and what are the best platforms to do so? I know you started talking about that initially. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said, we basically run our own record label, and it's easy to do these days. You can, and it's not saying a lot, anyone can do it, but basically once you've finished recording a song, and I would also recommend, if you can make it yourself, do it yourself. If not, there are a lot of producers out there that are willing to work long distance that can really, boost up your end product. So you can have a kind of do the scratch tracks yourself at home, send it to a producer online that you find that you just really like, their mixing or the final product on other songs that they've done. And it might be less expensive than you think, and then once you've got your finished product, it doesn't have to be a full album. I say these days, you were saying it's part of the changes that are happening with the way people consume music is I feel like it's more singles based now. Anytime you're done with a song, put something new out. It's a new reason to go out and blow up your social media. We've got a new song. If you're only doing an album a year, you've got one piece of news every year, right? So do a song a month instead. And then you can distribute it with what we used to do was CD Baby. We've transitioned now to DistroKid. I think DistroKid is great. They're cheap and they seem to be very effective. We can put a song out and in a few days it's on iTunes, Spotify. They will register a cover song with Harry Fox so that you're legal, you're covered legally there and you don't have to pay for a lawyer. If you don't, I still recommend if you've got the money, hire a lawyer. But if you don't, then you can go through DistroKid and chances are good that they're going to have you covered. You can just say that you're not the songwriter and the songwriter will get the appropriate royalties. So I would suggest looking into DistroKid. There's a few others, but that's the one that we use. CD Baby has been around for a long time, and I think they're also a good option.
Eric, let me have you jump in here and specifically any further additions you want to add to that.
Yeah, my comment is totally accurate what Jason was talking about. He's done it long enough in the independent fashion. He's found a methodology that works. And I'm not going to refute anything they said because they are absolutely correct. But I believe I want to go backwards. And I want to look at the artist's question as what value does a distributor do for you? And what is my goals for distribution? So I can come up with the obligations and the potential of what I want distribution to do with me first. I just can't just throw it up there. I have to have a plan and a concrete direction of what I want to get. And like Jason said earlier, if you only reach 100 people and they're supporting your living doing it, well, then you've reached your distribution point. But if you want worldwide distribution to go to 4 major territories and domestic United States, and you want a domination of a market, well, that's a whole different demographic, but it's also a larger obligation. Is the artist ready for that, to accept that? If the artist still goes to a label with their own independent label, do you still get the same service and direction? If you don't have that and you don't get everything that you need, are you still ready for that point? So the choice is still up to the artist, But I believe the artists should be a lot more productive in coming up with research and proper data to find out how they should approach which way to go, because there's obligations in both and there's goals to reach, and there's still the amount of financial cost and time and politics to build leverage up in the industry. And if that's your goal, is to build leverage up in the industry so you can move, like you said earlier, Uduak, I want to move in this industry. How do I do it? And with the proper research and finding the right distributor that believes in you, gives you the service that you need, and you have your goals and marketing plans in place, the distributor will be able to do much, much more because they know that you're focused on where you want to go.
So Eric, we'll put a pin in it because I'm going to come back to you on playlist, and I want to start off that discussion with you. But let me go quickly to Marcus and say, and follow up with some of the key points he raised about what value a distributor will bring to the table for you. So what are a few tips, maybe 1 to 2 tips that you can give to artists and their managers and other executives representing their interests on what they need to be looking for, including their lawyers? Sometimes lawyers are directly interfacing with distributors. So what are some of the key tips, maybe 1 to 2, that you would suggest they need to be tuned into?
They should look for an artist that is a triple threat, an artist that is a wonderful songwriter, B, a wonderful performer, C, the music translates into media. It's very important today to translate your music and to be open-minded to re-edit and recut your songs for streaming and for features and for television. Another part of the triple threat is to be a good performer in concerts. Live concerts are very, very important today because of the lack of royalty coming from masters because of all the downloading, and it's difficult to get a royalty off of masters today. So live performance, especially for new artists, is extremely important. I know there's a lot of house concerts going on for up and coming artists. So you start as an up and coming and a house concert, then you go to a local concert, and then you go on a major tour opening with a major artist. But I think an artist really has to do 3, 4, and 5 dances today, and to be a wide scope, a rainbow of different aspects, like a little corporation. Every artist, I think the rappers had it down 20, 30 years ago, where they started these little corporations of merchandising, of having their own little teams. They were way ahead, and I believe every artist today has to have that.
Okay, and back to Eric. Marcus says an artist has to do at least 3 or 5 dances in this day and age. We'll come back to Jason to talk about that, but let me start with you, Eric, on the playlist, and that's one of the dances artists have to do these days. And the key question every artist has, and even their representatives are, or is, how do I get on a playlist, and specifically Spotify, because that's probably one of the top playlists that you want to get on. So what is your advice on the value of playlist and how an artist should approach that in terms of getting on?
I'm going to go slightly backwards and look at the playlist of today versus the playlist of yesterday on a terrestrial FM or AM. And how do you get on a playlist is one thing, but prior to that, what is a playlist going to do to drive your song? So it's, again, you're targeting that market, you're targeting that playlist, and you're finding out the value, the competition, so where your song could lie on, and how many different playlists are out there today. I mean, there are hundreds. And if I look back even at the merge February 8th on FMQB with TikTok and Universal Music Group, that's going to be another playlist. You know, where are all your songs you're laying that at, and who would go and be driven to that playlist to make sense to create a revenue stream from your song? If that's the goal, then it's not only how do I get on a playlist, because if you have the right material and the right timing and the right methodology, you can get on it. What's more important, in my opinion, is what it's going to do after it's on the playlist. How is the song going to remain on there? How is the song going to continue to drive and be focused to move up the playlist or down the playlist, or to remain in the same spot? And what's the goal of the music and the song on there? It's what Marcus said before. Are you playing the triple threat dance, 5 points, where the song's got to be in the playlist so it could be listened to for media, so it could be downloaded for consumers, so it could go over for touring potential. I mean, there are lots of choices that I believe just getting it on the playlist is one, but what to do after it's on there.
Okay, so Jason, I'm going to come to you to talk about that playlist, the value of the playlist and how to get on it, especially as an indie artist, because it seems like you're sort of doing things your way and not necessarily the conventional way, which is great for those who may not per se be on the label pathway.
Yeah, so first of all, I just like to clarify that I think it's less of a choice between doing it the independent way or the major label way. I think that pretty much everyone strives to get signed by a major label, but it's kind of more, you just have to take baby steps. So if you're not on a major label, you are, as Marcus was saying, you have to wear all the hats yourself. You have to do everything yourself. You're going to have to make a music video. You're going to have to produce the song yourself just to get the initial attention of your team, right? And then that it also involves live performance and social media, right? So how you're going to get on a playlist is just by, you're going to have to do all of those things to get someone's attention, right? And so the content has to be something that you love. And, I don't think starting out, you necessarily want to do the McDonald's commercial where you're cutting the intro. I think you make amazing music that people fall in love with. And that's how you end up on a playlist. That's how somebody who doesn't have a manager, doesn't have a major record deal, gets on a playlist, right? By making amazing music. And you'll know it's amazing when you make it. And so when people come into my studio, a lot of times they kind of start off with this idea of like, how am I going to make commercial music that everyone loves? And I just say, I don't know. I don't think anyone actually knows, right? The reason why a major label band is huge is because a major record label put millions of dollars into them. They're going to have some level of success if that happens. But I think on the independent level, you make amazing music that you love yourself. You're going to find an audience of people who also loves that music. And then you're going to end up on people's playlists. But it can't just be that, though. It's got to be touring. It's got to be social media. It's got to be making a compelling video. That doesn't necessarily mean an expensive video, but a compelling video, right? And then you get those things going. And then I feel like the playlists just kind of start happening, because you've made something amazing.
Okay, great points, Race. And just in general, one of the ways to do that too, in terms of getting on a playlist, is to go back to your distributor and depend on the distributor. And I think that's where Eric's point about the value and the fit for the distributor comes into play, because that distributor can tie into the Spotify's and all the other different playlists that are out there to get you on, if you're making great music like Jason is saying. All right, so
and you can, and just to clarify, anybody can get on DistroKid and be on Spotify tomorrow.
Absolutely, and that's why I wanted to emphasize that channel of going to through your distributors as well. Yes, you make great music, but what's the specific channel of getting on a playlist? Go back to your distributors and they will help you get on that playlist. But critical is that music, making great music, so that in fact there's value and you even stay on that playlist you're trying to get onto. So even myself as a content provider, and also of course advising several clients in the space, one of the things you want to be very cognizant of is that the key thing why you want data is it allows you to make informed business decisions about resource allocation, where exactly you're going to go with respect to touring, for example. If you are an artist and you, on your back-end data, you see that you're making music to target folks in the US, for example, but the people that are actually being responsive, your music fans, are actually somewhere in Europe in some really distant location, maybe that money and budget and time should be spent allocating over there for purposes of touring and directly and ad placements that directly are responsive to that particular audience. So that's some of the things that data will allow you to do. Also, data will allow you to zoom in very closely on your brand identity and also the kind of campaigns that you create. All of that stuff is super important. So that's why on the back end of all of your social networks, it's all available to you, especially if you form a fan page. You can see in real time, drill down to even the city, gender, among other things, interests. You can see psychographical information, demographical information, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok, all of those platforms provide that information. And if you're an indie artist, you should be using it very, very diligently, as much as a larger record label would use that information. It also is very good for potential investors, whether the investors are coming directly to you to invest in your music business, your indie label, or you have a larger record label looking to invest in you, because then you can just say, hey, here are my numbers, here's what we're accomplishing, and you bring more to the bargaining table in terms of negotiating the kind of rights you want and the kind of deal that makes sense for you. So let me go to Jason to wrap that up on the data side. So Jason, anything on that data side from an indie standpoint that you have had to use for purposes of your business?
Yeah, so we would do. I'm speaking in past tense because we haven't toured in a while, obviously, yeah. With the current state of things. But whenever I'm promoting for a tour, we do a huge amount of Facebook advertising, and then we take our previous tours, and at some point we actually started selling our tickets to all of our shows ourselves. We have a booking agent and a manager and all of this, but in the old days, we would have the promoter sell all of the tickets. We'd show up to the show, and whoever was there was there. We wouldn't know how many people bought tickets. Promoters will sometimes, and again, I'm coming from a very small club touring perspective. It's not the 3,000 seat places, more like 800 people max. And so in these kind of scenarios, you're dealing with an independent promoter, and a lot of times they do these things where they make your opening bands sell tickets. Right? But the opening bands don't really sell those tickets. They just pay to get on the show. It's kind of a strange little thing that you have to watch out for. And they'll say, well, you have 4 opening bands. Each of them have sold 50 tickets. So there's going to be 200 people there. Well, there isn't necessarily 200 people there. It's just that those people bought those tickets and didn't sell them to anyone just so they could get on your show. So what we started doing was just selling the tickets ourselves so that we could know how many tickets were being sold. And that took a lot of data, figuring out how many fans we actually had in every city, going out and we could announce a tour 6 months ahead of time. We could see exactly who bought tickets and what cities needed more promotion. What cities that one's almost sold out. We're good. Let's but Albuquerque, New Mexico has only sold 25 tickets. Let's just put a few $100 on marketing in that one territory. And so being able to sell your own tickets, I think, is something that you can do there are independent websites that allow you to sell your own tickets. And promoters, I found, are generally open to the concept. They're like, oh, you want to do the work? Cool. But that might be something that, you have to assess yourself if you're up for the task. If it's not something that you want to do, all of that data mining, all of the just really learning your fan base, figuring out that stuff on your own, then it's probably best to let the promoters do it. But I personally think that it's something that you should really get into and find out who your fan base is. Find out where your listeners are. That's going to help determine what cities you should even play in the first place. So.
Yeah, let me drop 2 tips for everyone listening or watching. 2 tips. Number 1, YouTube Academy, excellent training down to very detailed backend on data mining and digital marketing as a whole. And of course, as the budget allows you, you can certainly increase that. But the initial training for free is absolutely excellent. Another one is Google as well. Google's got an excellent training on the back end as well. So use those 2 tools because they will carry you really, really far off. Before we go to Marcus, because I really liked, Jason, the angle you were going into with respect to just the live aspect of it and the manual process. So I will get into promotion in a quick minute, and I'll go to Marcus for that and tie Ramsey back in. But before we do, let me just touch a little bit on legal, because of course we're giving MCLEs for this as well. And so for legal, when we talk about distribution, your clearances are important. You don't want to get your distributor in trouble. They don't want to get in trouble as well. And most likely you're going to sign a distribution agreement that grants them a license, and among several other things that you will be granting to them. And that will cover your recordings, your music, music streams, release of work, among so many things. So make sure you have that reviewed and evaluated by an entertainment lawyer that knows what they're doing, particularly in the music space, so they can really, really make sure you are protected. If for whatever reason you can't afford one, or regardless if you can, CLA is certainly a good organization to try to field attorneys as well through. All right, so Marcus, let's get straight into promotion. And I think Jason really set it up nicely for us to do that. What is an EPK? Is it still relevant today?
Electronic press kit is extremely relevant if you want to do many things. If you want to do a concert in a specific territory, one thing that is interesting about artists is you might do well in another country or another territory versus this country. There's Canada, there's Mexico, there's Brazil, there's Germany, there's England. These EPKs, electronic press kits, are your introduction to not only managers and promoters in those countries, but also to the press. And you need them when you are, let's say, performing somewhere and you have a small fan base or a medium-sized fan base, and you pull out that EPK immediately. You do a concert, somebody comes running up to you and says, listen, I need some press quickly. And also, I'd like for you to maybe do a television spot and an interview tomorrow while you're in town, while you're in Paris here, or while you're in Baltimore. Come on the Baltimore News. Can we run an EPK with a live video on the Baltimore News? Sure, you have it. So that is extremely important to have on an EPK different lengths also. So you have maybe a live length with some live music, an introduction to the band or the artist, and maybe 30 seconds of a single, or you have a 30-second version, a 1-minute version, or a 3-minute version with a little more of a documentary.
Excellent. I happen to also be a member of the press, and I've had easily the span of over 13 years relating to music, thousands of MP3 sent my way. And over time, I've seen it sort of evolve to just links. I prefer the links because then I don't have to worry about all those downloads, and I can easily go and see what you have. Make sure you have a good bio, short and sweet. Make sure you have a good profile in your social networks, brand consistency along all aspects online. Make sure also that you have strong images. Sometimes the images are just terrible. And then also even the links, among other things. And then be intentional about forming relationships with music bloggers, music influencers online. And nowadays it's so easy to reach them, including the latest social network that's coming up, Clubhouse, right? It's so easy to reach a lot of these people and have conversations with them and be genuinely interested in what they're doing. And then when you have music, you can then directly connect with them, whether through the social networks or emailing short and sweet messages with the link that they can easily open. Marcus, I want to go to you on that point, that radio relevance as well, and saying it's still relevant, and we're just, consumption pattern is just different. For TV, are you finding that for traditional media, for purposes of publicity, that it is still relevant, or should we just trust YouTube's and have artists direct their attention and their representatives towards YouTube?
No, the definition of television and TV is vastly spread like a pizza now. And we have Hulu, we have Pluto, we have Amazon, we have Netflix, we have Disney Plus. The streaming, especially how much it's burst forward with the pandemic, and it's going to stay there, is a viable institution. All these are great institutions for promotion for any type of artist to get licensing and to get the best of promotion for their music. And you have, it used to be 10, 15 years ago, a soundtrack album in the old time did very, very well. Not so much anymore, unless you have Mad Men, or you have the Sopranos, or you have something where the music is driving the show, those are older shows. But there's newer shows that music does drive the show. So promotion on the streaming and what we call television, or laptops and just the internet of television, I'm not even talking about theatricals, just television itself, is the best promotion, I believe that.
So we have the traditional media, new media. I'm sort of just gonna, we've talked a little bit about it, the video, the blogs, the podcast. video games being a big one right now. But let me jump straight for purposes of streamlining it even more to our social media, specifically TikTok phenomena. And I want a contrast between Eric and Jason, right? Jason, do you believe, particularly from whether an indie artist or a more established artist, that you jump on that new craze, whatever it is, in order to get your music out there? TikTok, we know, is breaking artists, like almost as if it's a label, and it's just really changed the game, really disrupted things. So what's your perspective for purposes of how you distribute music through social networks, particularly TikTok?
Yeah, well, I think, TikTok or any other new social media outlet, you're going to have to jump on. I mean, you just have to find whatever people are watching and put yourself in that place, And this goes back to, I wanted to comment on the EPK thing too, just to put in a little note on that. We started national touring back in 2009, and we've had a publicist. It's just been on every single tour. I think we've toured 2 or 3 times a year since 2009 until recently. And we never went out without a publicist. It almost took more time to go and do all of the kind of TV performances, interviews, bloggers, and that's all to get on whatever traditional media or newer social media. And then anytime something new would come up, it's kind of like, I remember Vine was the big thing for a little bit, and it was just little snippets of videos that would loop. It's like, okay, we'll try that, do a little performance and put it out there. I think it could be like maximum of 8 seconds or something weird like that. Anyway, that didn't really take off, but I feel like anytime something new comes on, be on the forefront, get as many of those initial followers as you can, give it a shot. And, if it turns out being a Google Plus or something that just doesn't work out, really there's no loss. But always keep your EPK up to date, have a website. And I also wanted to mention, because we really oriented ourselves so much with that kind of EPK setup, that a lot of the bloggers that you're looking for, they need content. They need something to copy and paste almost, and then they just kind of change it around. And if you don't give it to them, well, let me put it a different way. If you give them something that represents you well, then it's going to end up being used. If you don't give them something to use, they might come up with something that doesn't represent you well. And so you want to have your pictures, your preferred videos. You don't want them searching Google to find a picture of you. You want to provide the people who are going to be interviewing you with, the content that you want them to put out. And so I think that helps with the social media side of it too. So you go on a tour, you provide a really nice EPK, you hire a publicist, so important. They're not all super expensive. You can find someone that will do the job, I think, on your budget. And then you get on the social media, have yourself represented the way you want to be represented with your EPK, and push forward with any new social media.
Great. Let me have Eric chime in on the promotions part of it, and then I want to wrap up that publicity side and go into ads. So Eric, one of the reasons I wanted sort of the contrast between you and Jason is you're having maybe introvert personalities that happen to be artists, or maybe a little older artists, and they're saying, look, I'm not getting on TikTok and being ridiculous or making myself look silly when that's just not my thing. There are many platforms. I prefer to focus on 1 or 2 because that's where my audience is. So I don't have to go to TikTok. I don't have to go to wherever that other new wave is. What is your take on that? Does that put them at a disadvantage, or is that a good strategy? As opposed to Jason's strategy of, look, if it's out, get on it, see if it works. If it doesn't, keep it moving.
Jason is absolutely correct. If I use the word timing as everything, the strategy, I believe, is a good key word. Strategy and the ability to manipulate fans, technology, create a strategy to create movement is what is a key concept. And that's what we all want to do right now, is we want to create movement, to create traction, to move through the mess that we're in and to find out what's relevant for us. So, but like Marcus said, and Ramsey said, you can't throw out traditional media because it's still relevant. It's still important. And without traditional media, you would never have new technology media. So you need both of them. And
so sorry to jump in there. If your personality doesn't jive with TikTok, You still have to make yourself make it work. Is that what you're
Well,
suggesting?
that's really interesting because I just read Universal's news flash of the FMQB on the merge.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the quote said, TikTok users will be more empowered than ever to express themselves through music, soundtrack, or video creations with songs about which they are passionate and build communities around artist and music-centered culture. It's kind of a very long-winded political statement here. However, it still says, is TikTok going to go beyond 12 and 26-year-old demographics by
Exactly.
working with Universal Music Group to expand the possibility so TikTok becomes the new Spotify, the new traditional, to new whatever it is? And as Universal Music Group said, well, like we said in the quote the other day, if you can't beat them, join them. We might as well do business with TikTok. And now, since TikTok is a Chinese-based company, does that give us more access into the Asian community for the use of universal music and protection for our artists? So is my personality right for TikTok? It depends upon the time in which you jump onto these platforms. Could I still do music that's relevant for TikTok users and then have them create their own interactive video over it with me not in it? Yeah, the music is music is music. It's a culture, it's a society, it's something that's relevant for everybody. So my personality, my look and age may not necessarily be the choice to choose or alienate myself away from TikTok. Does that mean I'm going to go back to Facebook because that's the old school style? Well, it just depends upon, in my opinion, how you reach your demographic and your core audiences and what the value of your music is doing for that particular platform. So
Yeah.
if I use Twitter opinion, Instagram pictures, Facebook content and news, and TikTok for entertainment or new creations, well, then that's 4 platforms that I'm hitting right there, no matter what.
So just put it all out as Jason is suggesting. So I'm going to go to Marcus to lead the conversation on advertisements. But before I do, let me wrap it up on promotion on the legal. And the way I want to do it is to go back to Jason's point on publicity. I've had the opportunity to represent talents, celebrity talents, where crisis management is an issue. And I have a background in communications. And as a result of being a part of the media as well, I've dealt a lot with publicists. And one of the things you have to think through is, as Jason correctly points out, you can't do everything. And there's a saying that get someone else to carry your name or word and it goes miles longer. So strategically from day one, whether you have the budget or not, you should start thinking through first as an artist that you do want to have a representative in terms of publicists. And what you look for in publicists, number one, the ability to handle crisis management is super important. Secondly, you also want to look at a publicist that's truly well connected. There's no value in a publicist if he or she shows up and doesn't know who needs to be able to get the word out, doesn't have the media relationships, doesn't have other key relationships to get the word out about you. And then finally, with respect to publicists, just quickly breezing through it, is always have an agreement in place, outlining the scope, the duty, the nature of the relationship, and clarifying in this day and age, if your publicist is creating content, who owns that content? If they're creating it on your behalf, especially in an independent contract or consultant standpoint. So clarify all that relationship. If you want to own it, then obviously have the right clauses in it, consult with the lawyer to help you with that. But definitely think through your publicist. And Jason, great point that you brought through. So let's transition now. We've gone through that marketing value chain to keep it very simple and crystallized for you, whether you're a lawyer advising your clients or your talent, or your music executive advising clients. Okay, we're going to Jason to tell us his specific methodology as an indie artist. And then I want to zoom straight to Marcus to start talking about touring. So Jason.
All right, well, a very wise teacher I had named Eric Chun taught me long ago that it's all about networking. All right. And it's not, and they always say, it's who you know. But also what Eric taught me was that it's not who you know, it's who knows you, right? So you have to have good relationships with people, all right? And if you can work it out so that you can do something that I think is something very important, which is called co-op advertising. That's what I learned when we were in the record label business, that a record store is going to put out advertising in their local market, right? And you want to be part of that local advertising. And so you can team up, a label can team up with a local store back in the day, I'm talking 90s, and promote their album for some, $30 or something like that. We're talking like, real record labels, real record stores, but there's maybe 10 albums advertised on this page. So you can team up with other bands to come up with a single ad. If you have friends, if you've networked with other touring bands to buy a full page ad in a big magazine, you can partner up with, and what we've done a lot is partner up with gear manufacturers. We have an endorsement deal with Korg, Black Star amps, several guitar or Ernie Ball strings. And these are companies that the band has the kind of cool factor. They might not have the money to actually buy an ad, but they've got the kind of cool factor. So if you've developed a relationship with someone, if you've done your networking and you have a good relationship, you can call them up. You can be like, hey, we have a tour coming up. Is there a way that we can get in on some advertising? And a lot of times they'll throw some of your tour dates on an expensive ad that an independent band would never be able to pay for themselves. But you give them some marketing shots, and hopefully you can get that kind of co-op advertising going. That's kind of on the traditional media side, magazines and stuff like that. On the independent side, of course, I think that it's invaluable to pay $30 for a Facebook ad. Like just whatever your budget is. If you're promoting a show and all you have is $30, put it on Facebook. You can also do YouTube ads, right? So you can make your video or a snippet of your music video show up before another band's video plays. That's something that you can put a little money in, and it really does work. It expands, it takes that whatever budget you have and makes it so that you can reach the people in your local market that you're going for. So I think those two things, you can do it yourself with whatever budget you've got. But if you can network and you can get co-op advertising with bigger companies that have a bigger budget, then that's really the best way to get kind of
Great
big
tips.
advertising without spending
Great
money.
tips, great tips. Don't forget your Instagram ads and your podcast. I've been running a podcast for about a music business and law podcast for about 9 to 10 years. Initially when I started, I had a completely different agenda. So I was solicited a lot for ads on my platform. I deliberately didn't want those ads, but I know for a fact that because I had a different agenda on what I was trying to accomplish in a very specific niche group, and I didn't want the distraction initially, but I can tell you lots of solicitation, and the pricing model, depending on the podcaster, can absolutely work with you to have you reach a very dynamic audience. My podcast was created for emerging African artists. Over time, my audience evolved to be not only those artists, but all decision makers or some of the top heavy hitters in Europe, in Africa, and in Hollywood. So you never know, just really do your research carefully on the podcast or music podcast you want to get on, and then approach the podcaster for purposes of just working out a deal. So don't forget your podcasters, don't forget your Instagram and all the other platforms that Jason has already mentioned, and then the traditional model as well. Okay, so zoom in straight from Jason, traveling straight up on my screen to Marcus. Marcus, let's talk touring, and then we'll involve everybody else in that process. I know you've had that a lot of experience on the touring side of things. We're in a COVID reality. We know for a fact that everybody's saying, will live ever be the same again, or will it be small? Like, what is the input? How does artists that approaching this, you've got Jason for over a year now, hasn't toured, or almost a year. So what's the answer? What's the solution with touring?
I don't have an answer for COVID, but I do have an answer within the industry, is that the discussion of when this is going to happen is in July. Is that Live Nation and lawyers that I know who are in the concert business, especially I spend about 1/3 of my year overseas doing concerts. I produce concerts for a big star over there. And what I'm hearing is July, August, they're going to decide whether they're going to start funding and start putting up money towards the artists. They don't want to start doing pay or plays. And of course, a pay or play is you pay the artist, and all of a sudden, if the concert's canceled, the artist still gets paid by the promoter. One of the devastating realities of COVID is when they stopped the concerts a year ago. I'm not going to name the artists, but a lot of artists had pay or play deals with Live Nation. And what happened was, in many situations, the promoters, Live Nation also, but many promoters still had to pay the pay or play to the artists, and there were no concerts. So, and if anybody doesn't know what pay or play is in the audience there, pay or play is you have to pay the artist no matter what, whether the artist pays or plays, or the audience is 5 people or 10,000 people or 20,000, the artist still gets the same fee. So if you cancel a show, artist still gets paid. So to answer your question, and Dr. Fauci is saying the same thing, that they're looking at possibly Broadway opening in September, October. Very possible. With all these decisions, because of the money and getting the shows together, will be made probably in July or August. So we have cold theaters all the way until July or August.
Okay, so Jason, notwithstanding that reality that we're all aware of, I want you to talk about not only the traditional aspect of what you've been going through with respect to touring, the transportation, accommodations, ticket sales, merchandise, staff, fan club. Just give us a nutshell of what that reality was, and then talk to us about whether you're incorporating any kind of virtual events and virtual live streaming. If you're looking at investments in tech and music tech, we've seen a lot of investments in the live streaming arena for live events. So I wonder if that's an alternative you're already thinking about and incorporating for purposes of your band.
Yeah, well, it's a broad topic to go into all of that for touring, but maybe you can remind me that list one more time. We can go down. We can do it one at a time, but just to cover the
Hold on a second. For the traditional part, all I want is just a short synopsis of some of the challenges you experienced on the road with respect to touring. Some of the pitfalls you think artists should avoid. And then I want to know if you're using any kind of live event platform moving forward with the whole COVID reality.
Right. So, for us, I think it was a really big step forward to have our own, we ended up getting, a tour bus, having a nice crew of people that we could rely on, someone to handle merch, someone that could set up, basically a roadie, someone to set up the gear, someone who could do lighting and production. I think that's a big, a lot of people just think, well, you just show up to the place, you set up your drums and guitar and you play the show. But, and a lot of times, if you're a club band, the clubs have all of that stuff that they will do for you. But if you can control it yourself, you can make the production happen. It's just the more, like, it's easier to predict how the show is going to go and to provide something that people are really going to be into. I think that's just part of, putting together a crew and a touring situation that you can rely on, that will make it so that every show goes smoothly. And then beyond that, of course, being really in touch with how many people are going to show up. If you're not selling your own tickets, just keep communicating with the promoter and the other bands that are going to be on the show. A lot of times they're local bands, and you can communicate directly with those local bands. I've known so many bands that don't really connect with the local people before a show. They just kind of show up and, oh, I guess a lot of people didn't show up today. That's weird, and it's like, you don't have to be surprised by that. You can talk to the people in every single city and just make sure that you're prepared for what's going to happen there. And again, if it seems like there isn't a lot of buzz, put in some more pressure on the promoter to make posters, send them some posters, get more action going on with local media, with your publicist, so that that when you do show up, I mean, that's really the most important part. How many people are going to show up, and is the show going to go smoothly? Of course, that seems like a bygone era. It's been so long now. So to get to the next topic, we've always done live streaming. I feel like you can do that anytime. You can do an acoustic performance where in the park if you want. I think it's a different thing. That to me is more just promotion, or just keeping people aware of what you're doing, kind of just staying relevant. I wouldn't call it something that's going to generate a lot of income. There's I know on Patreon and some things like that, you can charge for kind of exclusive experiences, and that's becoming more of a way that you can earn a living doing it. But to me, it's like it's just going out there and performing for people is where you're going to make the most connection and have a viable career.
Okay, so let me have Eric just add one key points to the discussion on touring. Eric, any additional points? And then I want to wrap this conversation and this panel up with music licensing and syncs. And so Eric, any final point on the touring side of things?
I can certainly add an alternate types of touring. You should not discount a huge worldwide show every year in Anaheim in January, the NAMM show, and at least 50% of the artists of musicians go to that show. And before COVID, the last year's show generated 105,000 people for 4 days. And that was with live performances and everything else. Now, this year they had a digital NAMM, but they still maintain digital interviews and performances online, and those performances were streamed and they're still archivable on the nam.org site. Within that fact, we shouldn't discount the endorsements that manufacturers provide for touring artists. And they've lost a lot of revenue because if you're not touring, you don't need sticks, you don't need cymbals, you don't need strings, you don't need lots of things. You don't need keyboard stands, you don't need mics. And the manufacturers have relied very heavily on pop-up ads to continue the exposure and promotion of manufactured products. Of course, I would close up the touring aspect that manufactured supported endorsements for touring musicians are essential for any musician and artist that's with a label or not to continue to play music and to get the best sounds that they can get. So the tour is, like Jason said before, you have the ability to control the destiny of the performance on the show.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. Touring
And I-
agreements, of course, super essential. Insurance. Some of the cases that I've seen have been some really crazy failure to do due diligence before embarking on a tour, getting to the destination, and all hell breaks loose. So super important to sort that out. Dot your I's, cross your T's. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get much into those details, but if you have further questions about that, feel free to ask with respect to touring and the legal pitfalls to really think through and avoid. Let's go to Marcus and round it off with licensing. So for everyone listening or watching, the whole point was to put you through or have you go through this marketing mix of looking at the product, distribution, of course, promotions, and ultimately sales of that product. So really now as an artist or artist representative or whatever industry professional you are, you're now at a point, songwriter, you're now at a point where you have someone like Marcus looking at you and wanting to buy that music, right? Wanting to license it. What are the process that goes through? What is the process and how does that work? So Marcus, let's start off with what fees are we looking at, or what are the earnings we're looking at, possible range of earnings when it comes to sync licensing, and then walk us through why sync licensing is important.
Right, I can't get into fees unless I explain, Ms. Uduak, what I need. So
Please.
what you need, it's very important what we need in the film. So if you take a look at me, I am the licensee. And again, I represent the director and or the producer or an actor or the studio. And I am coming to you, the musician, the writer, the owner. So you're the owner, you're the licensor, I am the licensee. And let's give an example, and this will establish the fees. Let's say I have and we're in a visual medium here, okay? So I'm going to talk visual. We're in a nightclub, we have a nightclub scene, and we have an actor walking through the nightclub, and then there's dialogue in the middle of the scene. And then he leaves the nightclub. And by the way, the actor is also singing your song, okay? So what I need is a song that's playing. Let's say it's a club. I need a song being played on the speakers in the nightclub. I need the actor to sing the song. And I also need, in fact, the song is so great, I want it in my closing credits. That's 3 licenses, and those are 3 separate fees. Okay, so that's what I need. One is called a background vocal source, which is the music in the club. One for the singing is called the visual vocal, and then the closing credit song is called a CC, which is a closing credit. So that's what I need. Here's what you're gonna demand, okay? I'm gonna put out a quote request to you. And what you're gonna ask me as a musician and an artist, you're gonna say, what's the film? what's the film budget? What's the music budget? Do you want the license for all territories worldwide? How long do you want the license? And I'm going to say in perpetuity, which is forever. I'm also going to say I want it for all territories. And I'm also going to say that I want it for all media, which is film, theatrical, streaming, cable, DVD, on and on and on, and game. I mean, maybe not games or trailers. License fee wise, I will say this: if you're an all-in composer, writer, artist, in other words, you own your recording and you own your publishing. That's two separate licenses. That's the master license and that's the publishing writer's sync. Okay, two licenses. You're going to give me an all-in, which is everything. Okay, you're going to give me two licenses. Okay, so you own that. So for the BVS, I'm going to offer you $30,000. Okay, and it's, let's say I need the song for 3 minutes. So as the actor walks through the club, we hear the music. I'm going to give you $30,000 for that. Okay. For the visual vocal, when he's going to sing along with the song, that's another license. I'm going to give you, and in essence, I'm paying you for the publishing because he's singing your song. It's not a master. My actor is singing. So I'm going to give you another $10,000. That's another license. But then I want the real doozy. What I want is that closing credit. And the big money on the closing credit is when the last scene happens and John and Kathy, they kiss and they hug. When the credits start, that song right there, I want to pay you $40,000. So there's two ways to look at this. If you're an all-in and I want those three licenses, you're going to give me a master license and a synchronization publishing license. If you're just the writer and there's somebody else singing the music, or if there's another recording, you're going to split that with the master. And that's called favored nations. And what's going to happen is, if let's say a major artist on a label is singing your song, okay, and I say to you, in the club, I want that song, and I'm offering you $30,000. Well, I will call you first and say, do you like my movie? Do you like my scene? Do you like my script? You say yes. I'll probably have you call the label and get what's called the favored nations. They will take that 30, you get 15,000, and then the label will get 15,000. So it goes two ways. You're either an all-in as an artist writer, or you're a writer and artists are doing your music as covers, So that's pretty much the fees. And that, I would say the fees that I quoted would be a $70,000. That's $70,000 total for you. Probably, let's say it'd be a $200,000 for the music budget. The film budget would probably be $20-30 million as a theatrical or as a streamer. So that's pretty much the way it works.
Marcus, you're always looking for great music, needless to say, right? And I'm also going to put you on my list for purposes of my clients as well. But everybody, if you have great music, find Marcus, because they're always in need of quality music placements as well. Okay, so having said that, I do have further follow-up questions in light of what you were sharing. Of course, when you're dealing with any kind of licensing agreement, there are issues with respect to, or clauses in their indemnification clauses that come into play. So for your purposes, for sync licenses, which has grown astronomically, that's why it's so important to your conversation that you're having, especially in light of the COVID reality. So can you explain a little bit more to the audience about indemnification clauses in your licensing agreements?
Yeah, indemnification is that you represent every aspect of what you're sending me. And I want to be indemnified. I want to be, my company, my film company wants to be protected against any sort of conflicts that you might have. You might be in a recording studio and you might have 5 writers, and you don't tell me that, and you put yourself down as the writer. I need to know who all the writers are. You might have a sample in, let's say it's a song with a loop and there's a little sample in there and you never got that clearance. I need to be indemnified, or what I want to know is what that sample is, and you need to clear that. Or you have to indemnify me, and then you will probably be under some sort of suit from an illegal sample. but I will be indemnified from anything that comes against you. So to me, indemnification protects me from any suits against you or any third-party conflicts.
And from a trial lawyer standpoint, even if I do successfully file a lawsuit against you, the artist or your representative, and Marcus, the third party that obtained the license, then Marcus can turn around and say, hey, you signed that, you have that indemnification clause in here, so I want my money back because I just paid it out to Miss Uduak and her clients, so you got to pay me back. And he would legitimately have a right to enforce that particular clause.
Right. Right,
So-
and that's difficult in a movie because you already have the movie and the movie's out and the song is in the motion picture. So you have to be very, very careful of what you're licensing and what you're listening to. And I'm a musician myself, so I could hear little samples and tidbits. So I'm pretty good at that.
That's great. So territory, you talked about territory. Can you tell us the specific territory coverage that you say typically is included in your licensing agreements?
Well, it's your licensing agreement. I personally ask for universal territories. I ask for all territories.
Yeah.
Every film company, even streaming, want the world because they want to relicense the film to different countries, Germany, Switzerland, everywhere. Basically, we ask for universal territories, all territories.
Yeah, and the reason why I was asking is I want to underscore that even that universal world is sometimes not seeming to be enough now, because a lot of the litigation arising around that is even expanded beyond saying, look, you didn't specify the universe, the world, however unknown or known, clause that you put in there forever till, space, cipher, whatever.
Right.
If you're not specifying those, saying the world is just the world, and as new technologies emerge, you might actually be precluded from usage.
Yeah.
Which is
then you have the
litigation that's
venues.
coming out now.
Yeah, and then you have the new and now and future streaming, right? Future technology. I think it's called future technologies.
Exactly. So just wanted to underscore that because we've seen some litigation around that. All right, perfect. The final question for you, Marcus, and that is, let's talk about music pitching library. What is the advantage or disadvantage from a standpoint of sync licensing and a music supervisor?
Sure, thank you, Ms. Uduak. Music libraries are prevalent everywhere now, and they're basically used in television. I call it AM television, which is your, local stations, reality shows, ABC, NBC, CBS. It's the shows that are quick and they're fun and they're social and they're not so much in the Netflix world where they're like little mini features. Music libraries are very prevalent. Let me explain one thing about a music library is a music supervisor will go quickly in television to a music library because the cue's already there. You don't have to hire a composer. You also, the network or the production company might have a flat deal with a specific music licensing company. So they pay a fee, an annual fee to a library, and they have this blanket license where they can just throw things in very quickly. Television, and we'll call it television, is a quick turnover job, and editors and music editors are working every single day. Reality shows, they work every day, and just very fast turnover. So that all these musics, instead of hiring a composer who could take 2, 3, 4 days for 5, 10 cues, the libraries are there, and they reuse these things over and over again. The advantage for a musician or a songwriter to be involved in a library is obviously a quick turnover. The disadvantage is that the music library takes a nice little chunk from your fees or from your actual license, and they assign, hopefully they don't take your copyright, but they will take on assignment a piece of the cue sheet and your income and maybe 10, 15% or 50% and take that royalty that you get from ASCAP, BMI, or SASAC or international. So libraries work as a broad stroke to get your music out there, but they also take a piece of on assignment, and that's very important. There's a difference between somebody taking your publishing flat out on copyright and someone taking it by assignment. Assignment, you could give somebody, by assignment, a piece on a cue sheet, all right, you'll take 25%, but that's only exclusively for this one show. So that's the advantage and the disadvantage.
Okay, so we'll jump into the question, but before I do, you all have been absolutely phenomenal. Excellent, excellent job. Good job. Thank you so much. Great insights. I appreciate it. Licensing agreement didn't get much into from a legal standpoint. It's a complex agreement. You need a lawyer. There's no getting around that. Get one. And several organizations, including, the lawyers and of course, CLA that can assist you with that as well. Okay, so can artists dissuade content infringers by copyright registration in all content, i.e. the composition, the drafts before sending to producer, final mix, master, music, video?
Well, my take on it is if you can afford it, make sure to protect yourself in every way you possibly can.
There's an issue of minimum rights versus maximum rights versus minimum protection versus maximum protection, but it boils down to, as a U.S. citizen, how do you want to protect the R word, your rights? And that's what's at stake. That's what Todd and Jeff Brayback were talking about last week with Al Evers, is your rights in the composition, your rights in the production, your rights in the masters, your rights in the lyrics. I mean, all these R words, your rights to buy a keyboard and own it. So in compositions, yes, the basic definition of rights and what you're allowed to have for these legally enforceable privileges is key to ensuring that. That's why I registered my works. So I want to do that. Common law copyright, as we heard last week, is not enough. You need the statutory, you need the laws to help enforce that in a court of law. And Marcus and Jason would agree to these important foundation initiatives that protect us as creators. And that's what we need to do these days. We're not talking about domestic rights, but also what Braybeck's talked last week is the international relationships for international copyright protection too. So we have international licenses across the world.
I also want to point out about trademarks too. Pretty easy for you to go onto uspto.gov and register your trademark. I think it's $250 now. If you have an artist name, you want to protect that. If somebody else you can own the domain. You can be the bubblepops.com or whatever, but you have to register it as a trademark, and it's not that difficult to do. So I would just educate yourself and make it happen. If you can afford it, get a lawyer to do it.
So on the trademark, just for people that may not know what Jason is referring to, that's a source identifier that distinguishes one good or service from another. And essentially it could be a logo, a symbol, a name, among other things that Jason was specifically alluding to, the name. So yes, I always tell clients in the music world, you don't necessarily have that much of an issue on trademark. It's a larger focus is on copyright. However, as Jason correctly points out, it is important, especially when you're thinking about merch, right? So that takes you into the fashion law realm. And for fashion law, your name is everything. Trademarks are huge. You've got a trademark, because that's what gives you the ability to license that and make money off the merch, the mugs, all kinds of stuff that your logo appears on. So great point, Jason, that you add. And then the final point I would say is with respect to copyright. If you think about the film industry, a lot of studios will not even give potential producers any time of the day or script writers if they do not copyright the work, because they have been exposed over and over again to copyright lawsuits for copyright infringement. And so they protect themselves. And I think the same sort of applies when you're looking at music. If you're concerned about potential infringement, then you probably need to register your work and should register your work to protect yourself. All right. In regards to licensing fees, why would the licensor need to know the budget of the project to give a quote? Is there a sliding scale for those fees?
As a licensor, you're going to want to get your best money from me. So once you know what my film budget is, then you're going to scope yourself and say, okay, if I have a $1 million film and I'm going to give you this information because you're going to ask for it, you're going to ask, what is the film budget? So I say $1 million. and then you're going to ask what the music budget is, and I'm going to say $45,000. If my film budget is $20 million, my music budget is probably $300,000. If I have a $50 million or $60 million movie, my budget is probably going to be $1 million. So you're going to know that if I have only $40,000 and I have to license 5 songs, you know you're not going to hit me with a $20,000 license. You're going to say, I really want this song in the movie, and I'm going to give it to Marcus for $3,000. And then there's something called favored nations that lines up, which you would say is, Marcus, I want to give this to you for $3,000, but I want favored nation against everybody else. So every other person has to come back with $3,000. If I pay somebody $5,000, you have every right to collect $5,000. And the same thing goes with the escalation. $20 million, you could ask for a $20,000 license. A $50 million movie, you could ask for a $40,000 license. So it's really by you understanding what my budget is, you're not only helping me, but you're also helping yourself in not shortchanging you and also getting the best dollar for what you're giving me.
Is there something like an Angie's List available for producers who will take rough tracks and provide a final mix / mastered license ready product?
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of websites that are they're kind of like Angie's List, but are more for creative types, which is, I would say, something like Fiverr or freelancer.com, something like that. That's, it's just another thing, kind of a Craigslist. You can look in the Craigslist services if you want. But like I'm on several mailing lists for these kind of job opportunity websites. So something like Seek or Indeed, right? These are websites that you can sign up with, and you can just say music as a real general term and get on a mailing list. And anytime somebody has a job that they want fulfilled, then I might answer it, right? I might say, oh, well, I can do that. And so if you're somebody who's looking for a producer to mix your content, you might get on one of these websites and just kind of put an ad out and say, I'm looking to finish up an album. I have $30, or I have $1,000, or I have $10,000. You put your budget in, and you might get several replies. And of course, you want to double check who these people are, if they're legit, if they have real studios, or if it's just some guy trying to produce on his phone. It goes all over the place. But you can find that you can find people that will help you finish your song.
As far as copyright is concerned, how is copyright shared when an artist or composer are co-writing a piece? The default rule generally is they're joint authors, so essentially 50-50. If you don't want that result, then that's where your split sheets come in to parse out specifically the percentage of copyright ownership shares you have in the music, and you always want to make sure your splits are completed. All right, folks, we've come to the end. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. My esteemed, amazing colleagues, Marcus Barone, Eric Chun, Jason Sewell. You guys were awesome. I appreciate it. Great panel and great questions as well.